And a very good evening to you. This is Saturday evening. This is our in-concert session with myself, Christopher Dygan, the next in our live stream program coming to you from our home in KwaZulu-Natal. We hope you can join us for the next hour for an in-concert selection. This evening I have got a beautiful program of music which is focused around the idea of music telling a story, a narrative, an idea that these music that you hear will be able to paint a picture, or you'll be able to hear details of the story which is actually included or involved or inspired or linked to the music. And this evening I'll be playing music by Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven, Ravel and Liszt. I'll be ending off with Liszt's very dazzling and very exciting and very unique piece of music called the Mephisto Waltz, or the first of these Mephisto Waltzes. So if you are able to join us, please do hang around, stay with us for the next hour or so. It's a very exciting program, and I'll be telling you a few details about each of the pieces, as well as showing you an update or two on some of the images, composer images that we've dealt with a few weeks ago, and also a manuscript image that we dealt with last week in last week's sessions. As usual, if you are able to support us, I'm very grateful for any financial sponsorship or payment or support that you are able to offer during this lockdown time. Many people ask about live concerts, and not only is it just simply not a good idea to encourage gatherings of people in confined spaces for a long period of time, but also it's just impossible. It would be illegal under lockdown restrictions. So the only way that I'm able to continue making music and actually make a living is by doing this, but it also means that I can share these wonderful musical ideas, and through this wonderful live stream setup that we have, bring music to you in the comfort and the safety and the enjoyment of your own home and your own private space. So there's a bonus to that as well. So it is 6 o'clock on the dot, and I am going to start with the first composition, which is by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Now, Mozart, in his youngest years as a child, was paraded around Europe really with his father, and introduced to numerous courts as a brilliant child genius, which he really was. He was this charming young man, probably from 6 years old or so, and entertained many of the emperors and princesses, and featured in the royal courts in many, many places for many years. And in fact, this was a very lucrative opportunity for Mozart's father, as I said once before, in a period of approximately 3 months on one of these European excursions. They made enough money to support the family for 7 years. So later on, Mozart was about 21. He was now employed in Salzburg, and he wanted to go on another of these trips, which would end up through Mannheim, go through Mannheim, Munich, and ending up in Paris. And his father petitioned, I think is the right word, petitioned his employee that he wanted to be allowed leave to take the young Mozart, who was now 21 or so, on this trip, and he was refused. And Mozart was also in employment in the court and also was refused leave. So eventually resigned from his position and went with his mother on this particular excursion to go and rekindle something of this excitement and this opportunity of exploring some of Europe's great musical centers. But unfortunately, when he got there, he was no longer this charming child. He was no longer this precocious young boy. He was a young man who was another musician, talented, yes, but maybe his music was a little bit too busy, or maybe not the highest fashion of the day, especially for the very fickle Parisian tastes. And after a while, Mozart certainly found that he had outstayed his welcome and that things were not going particularly well. And in the summer of 1777, apart from all this fact that he didn't have a particularly good reception from the general public there, unexpectedly his mother died, which was a great loss for him, and he had to write to his father to tell him of this very tragic news. Now, during this time, the sonata I'm going to play for you, the sonata in A minor case 310, Mozart wrote this in Paris this year, and while he didn't refer to it specifically in the letters that he wrote, the piece of music, musicologists might say, well, you can't really put the two together. You can't really say that the one is inspired by this particular event, but I think it would be difficult not to have a link between them. So in this piece of music, the sonata in A minor, it really, I think personally, reflects something of that great drama the great tragedy and loss of his mother at this time. Out of the 18 piano sonatas that Mozart wrote, only 2 are in the minor key. Minor being would be a major key, which would be what we generally associate with happier music. And a minor key is something we associate with a little bit more of sadness, melancholy, or drama. And of the 27 piano concertos, only 2 are in a minor key. So when Mozart writes in a minor key, he's really coming to something a little bit different, something a little bit special, and expressing something out of the ordinary, you might say. And I find that in this piece, the sonata, the first movement from the sonata in A minor, even from the opening moments, which have this very driven rhythm, very persistent rhythm, this pounding almost in the left hand, a very strident melody. And throughout the piece, there's a torrent of notes. There's no break. It's a relentless outpouring, many different colors and many different sounds, but it just never stops until the very last note of the movement. And in the middle section in particular, Mozart writes fortissimo, which is something you very seldom find in his piano sonatas. That is to be played with great boldness, loud, very loud actually. And he writes a very rich orchestral sound full of dissonances, of great tension in the music. And this is very rare. It's something that Mozart very rarely opens that window, you might say, into that world, but this is certainly one of the cases. So this is the first movement from the sonata in A minor, K310, of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, which I think, in my own view, and I think many others share this, certainly reflects the incredible loss of his unexpected death of his mother at that time in Paris. the first movement, the Allegro Maestoso from the Sonata in A minor, K310 by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. As I say, a piece of music to start off this evening's program, of music that tells a story or paints a picture. And even though that's not an official link to certainly an event in Mozart's life, I think it'd be very difficult. Inspiration or some possibility that the sudden and unexpected death of his mother in Paris had an influence or is expressed in reflecting something of that in that music, very intense, passionate and very powerful outpouring there. What about them? Oh, yes, okay. What about them? Yes, well, of course. So I forgot to include this. So a few weeks ago, we had included a selection of artist portraits, including the work of the Iranian computer graphic 3D artist Hadi Karimi. And just a few weeks ago, subsequent to that, in fact, this month, about a week or so, he produced a portrait, his rendition or his version of interpretation of what Mozart would have looked like. And we're going to bring those onto the screen now. And I need to move this way to escape so I can still be here. This is the artist's version, based very, as I said previously, last time when we did a whole session on this. He does a huge amount of research into contemporary portraits, any biographical information. He can source people's descriptions of the composer. And I think what's particularly fascinating, you'll see in this Mozart, but also in the Chopin selection I'm playing later, you'll see a portrait which is now a more recent version. You'll see how the artist's understanding maybe of the composers or technique of producing these different portraits has actually changed and developed. So this is the image of Mozart. I think there are 2 or 3 images there. And the other image that I can show you just relating to last week's session of Saturday Nights in Concert, which was about the manuscripts. This is, in fact, the manuscript page of the sonata that I've just played for you, the sonata in A minor. That is Mozart's original autograph and handwriting with the date Paris 1777 at the top right-hand corner. I thought you might like to see those details again that continue those 2 themes of last week and a few weeks ago. I'm going to move on to a very unique composition by the composer Ludwig van Beethoven, one of his 32 piano sonata, and this is the sonata opus 81A. The A part is very unusual. Opus 81 is one thing, but to have an opus 81A and an opus 81B is very unusual. And apparently Beethoven published this, it was published, and at the same time, unbeknownst, or he got somehow muddled, another composition of his was also allocated the opus of 81 by another publisher. And so they had to distinguish them, separate them by the piano sonata being opus 81A, and I think it's a string sextet is opus 81B. But it's a sonata that Beethoven gives a program. It's the only sonata of the 32 works, and it's one of the few pieces that Beethoven writes that he really tells us exactly what the music is about and what is involved. So this piece of music in the French title is usually known in the French title, but somehow it was published in France, I think, first. Les adieux, meaning the farewell. The music is written in 3 movements, and it is inspired by the actual events of the Archduke Rudolph, who was Beethoven's very close friend and patron. And in 1809, I think it was, the Napoleonic armies were approaching Vienna, and it was feared that the Archduke's life was in danger with the approaching army. And so he had to leave the city. Now, Beethoven was very concerned about this because this was his very close friend, he and patron. He was concerned not only for the patron's safety, but also for his loss, and also for the fact that he was departing. And they obviously spent a lot of time together. He was a very important person in Beethoven's life. So the music is written in 3 movements. The first movement reflecting the departure, l'Heureux, and in the opening moments of the piece, you hear these 3 notes with the word l'Heureux, the syllables, the farewell, and it represents something of the anxiety and the uncertainty of the departure of the Archduke himself. And when you think about someone who's departed, when you're trying to say goodbye to someone, there's a lot of anxiety. You don't want to give away the intensity, or you don't want to sort of overshadow the moment of the loss of somebody. And there's a sort of sense of, okay, you're going to go. Are you really going to? Oh, you must leave. Yes, you must leave. It's like this constant farewell, this constant saying goodbye, of coming to terms with the acceptance of this moment. And that dislocation or that uncertainty is expressed a great deal with these outbursts, sudden outbursts of music style in the first movement. At the end of the first movement, there are a number of very gentle runs up and down the piano, getting quieter and quieter, which is said, can be interpreted, that this is Beethoven watching the Archduke's carriage disappear into the distance over the horizon. The second movement, the absence, is now the anguish and the despair that Beethoven experiences at the loss and the absence of the Archduke, and that leads then directly, there's no break, just at a very crucial moment after the absence with all these very dissonant chords and very sighing, desperate moments, at a slight change of note. There's a direct link into the third movement, which is now the return, and the Archduke is now returning, and so you hear the all happiness, skipping rhythms, and jolly good arms round embracing and drinking beer, I think, and a very happy feeling. So there are three very distinct moods and very distinct modes of thinking in these three pieces, in the three movements of this. And I'm fascinated by this piece. I've struggled with it for many years, probably about 25 years or so. And I've tried to play it, and so many things have puzzled me, and it's a very fine piece, but yet at the same time I'm very fond of it because I think there's something very personal about it. Beethoven often deals with very universal values or very big ideas, but I think in this piece there's something very personal, and there's something very poetic and very sincere that he expresses in the music in all three movements. So the last movement really is an exuberant dance of joy, dance and song of joy, and it's a really wonderful piece. So I hope you enjoy this. This is the Sonata, Opus 81A, Les Adieux, three movements by Ludwig van Beethoven. That was the Sonata Opus 81A. Les Adieux, sonata by Ludwig van Beethoven, the 26 of his 32 piano sonatas, written on inspiration of the departure, the absence, and the return of his very close friend and patron, the Archduke Rudolph. Such a great possibility, or such a great piece of music that it has a positive ending, a happy ending. I mean, gosh, if we got stuck in that second movement forever, it would be rather desperate. As I said, a particular, I think, a unique piece of music in that there is something so personal about it. It's a very difficult piece of music to find, sort of elusive. It's somehow written between the cracks, like much of Beethoven's later music. But this one, for me, has really been a puzzle. And I've really enjoyed working on it quite furiously for the last few weeks. So always a great inspiration and a great privilege to be able to play this music. I am going to go on to two compositions that illustrate the same story of Ondine. I was hoping to include a third version by Claude Debussy, but for various reasons I won't be including that tonight. So I am going to play for you the Ballade No. 3 by Frédéric Chopin, which is not exactly stated that it is written around the story of Ondine, but certainly it is largely or widely acknowledged that this is a large influence or a reference to the story. And the second piece by Maurice Ravel from Gaspard de la Nuit, which he titles Ondine and prefaces with a poem. And speaking of Ondine, here we go. Let's, oh gosh, here's little Lucy Lou. Oh yes, Frida. Here's little Lucy. Lucy, we're on that camera tonight. Do you want to play the piano? Look, we can have Lucy on the keyboard. Frida likes to whine at me when I'm playing too loudly sometimes. Frida, now is not your moment. So the story of Ondine. In your basket, Luce. In your basket. In your basket. In your basket. Ondine, the legendary water nymph who lives beneath the waves in the depths of the ocean and lures mortal men, sailors, to come and join her and be the king of the waves, so to speak. She says in the poem, prefacing the Ravel piece, "My father's the king of the oceans," and you can hear this voice in the depth of the music. And if you come and be with me and live with me, you will, of course, then be my husband. And of course, if he does, if this poor mortal person does, they will obviously drown, and things won't be so successful or so happy after all. So in the poem, the poet says that he rejects Ondine, and then Ondine cries out in a fit of anger, sheds a tear, and disappears beneath the waves in a shriek of laughter, which you hear at the end of Ravel's music. In the Chopin version, I'm not sure how the story is so literally depicted, but certainly there's this element of a kind of fluidity, a gentleness, a seduction, you might say. Very positive. It's a very beautiful piece of music. It's very lovely, beautiful, rich textures and flowing, fluid lines, and then this grand climax at the end. So I think it's really one of Chopin's most positive pieces, and really a richly scored and rosy-hued composition overall. And the Ravel is something quite different. It's really depicting that image of crystalline water and these droplets with glissandi up and down the piano. It's a depiction of a very fluid texture and a very graphic illustration in music. Very ravishing, as I always say, ravishing Ravel. But that'll be the second piece. The first one is the Ballade No. 3 by Frédéric Chopin. Oh, right, and yes, Barry's reminding me. So this is the second of the images, which I can show you. Two more images from the Iranian computer graphic artist Hadi Karimi. And these are of Chopin, his more recent, he was one of the first composers that he attempted to depict and to create. So these are more recent images that now that he said that he's got better skill and insight in terms of the programs that he's using, perhaps more realistic images of Chopin showing his illness and his constantly rather ill state, but very revealing and really wonderful images. Worth visiting his website, Hadi Karimi. Really wonderful images to see there. That was the Ondine, the first movement from Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit, regarded as one of the most difficult pieces. He set out to write one of the most difficult pieces for piano ever written, and that's the first part of it. I've yet to attack or try and find my way through the third one, which is the most difficult. But certainly Ondine is one of my favorites. And before that, you heard the third of 4 ballades by Frédéric Chopin. Both of those pieces representing or telling the story of the water nymph Ondine. And in the middle of the ballade, we had an extra accompaniment at the climatic moment where Frida decided to let out a scream and a wail. I think it's the top notes of the piano are sharp and hurt her ears. Hey, Lucy, you back for a second round too. So I'm going to end off, we're running a little bit over time, but I'm going to end off with one last piece, and this is the composition by Franz Liszt. This is his Mephisto Waltz. No, in your basket. No, you've had a chance. Okay, I'm going to in your basket. You can't just demand attention whenever you want. In your basket. Basket. In your basket. Good girl. Liszt is inspired by the story of Faust, as told by the poet Linau, and he writes 2 episodes that are engaging or that link to this story and parts of this poetry. So this particular scene, the dance at the village inn, Mephisto arrives with Faust and sees that the villagers are enjoying themselves and having fun. And he picks up his violin, calls his band of musicians, and they start tuning up the instruments and playing a beguiling and intoxicating waltz. Now, in the opening of this piece, you hear these notes. These are the notes of what a violin actually tunes to, and this is what Liszt writes to depict this tuning up of the instruments. He then launches into this waltz of great intensity and great excitement, and pulls out all his virtuoso stops and casts a spell over the dancers, the merrymakers, so that they are whipped up into a dance of incredible frenzy. He then casts his eye over Gretchen, the young maiden who he sees, and plays an incredibly seductive and very beguiling waltz. And in between all of this, the episodes, you can hear Mephisto laughing. This waltz is repeated again and again and again until she is completely, along with the villagers, intoxicated and completely under his spell. He then returns to the old opening waltz, which he repeats again and again, faster and faster and faster, until he works up the piece into the most climatic frenzy possible. It's a really incredibly difficult moment to bring together. And leads the intoxicated and the bewitched audience and Gretchen into the depths and the dark of the forest. And at the end of the piece, only the nightingales bear witness in this dark, deep forest as to what has really happened. So it's a very beautiful story. It's a lovely idea and beautifully depicted by the extra musical, the musical ideas, the musical concepts that Liszt brings into the music itself. But there's another element to it, because in some sense it offers Liszt a great opportunity from a poetic justification to unleash all of his brilliance and his virtuosity as a pianist that casts a spell over the audience. So there are moments, the intention of this incredibly beautiful waltz sounds incredibly beautiful. The intention of the music sounding unbelievably fast or unbelievably brilliant or superlatively magnificent, grand, or whisks of sound that sound almost impossible, is actually intentional. That Liszt does this on purpose because he's actually casting that same spell over his audience, which is you and I. And it's a really fascinating piece of music. It's one of Liszt's later works, and it's also said to show the idea that Liszt was actually the very first modernist. There's a very driven element to it. There's a great sense of refinement, not refinement, but a sort of pared down, very much to the point, and not romantic in any sense. It's actually a very graphic depiction of the scenery and how the elements fit together. So this is the Mephisto Waltz number 1. He did write other Mephisto Waltzes, but in quite a different vein. The first of these Mephisto Waltzes, The Dance at the Village Inn by Franz Liszt. workout on a Saturday, a hot Saturday evening. Nightingales witnessed what happened in the depths of the forest, along with a couple of Dachshunds barking their way through. Thanks, girls, for just barking your entire way through that. Gosh, that was Liszt's Mephisto Waltz, number 1. And here, this is little Frieda. Friedy's over there. Hello, Friedy. Why are you barking so much? You're barking. And you always like to howl when I'm playing in the top end of the keyboard. Do you think the top notes are too sharp? Do you think it needs a bit of toning and regulation? Do you think that's what it is? Yes. Yes. No, I know. Yes. I know a Steinway is better. I think so too. Well, there we go. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to Barry at the controls for the camera angles and the addition of the extra images. We hope you've enjoyed the session. Here's a little loose. Come little, whoopsie. Come little loose. Lucy, come. And if you are able to support us, if you'd like to support us financially or support me financially with these programs, if you're enjoying what you're getting out of them, enjoying the experience and the music and the performance, it's live stream number 94, I think. We've got some quite big and interesting plans for our live stream number 100, and really hoping that that's going to work out. And Barry's going to bring up a QR code onto the screen. If you point your camera at that, your camera app on your smartphone, then it'll take you to one of two sites. The Quicket one is also accepting international credit cards. The other Yoko one, the one on the left, is only accepting South African credit cards, apparently. Otherwise, you'll find all the other information about PayPal and other donation possibilities at my website. Please like my YouTube channel, like my Facebook page, it's Christopher Dyken Pianist, if you'd like to. And we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. I'm going to be playing another program of world music, very varied program, all sorts of different interesting things. And next Saturday, I've got a selection of new, mostly gentle, but very beautiful and very unknown music. I've chosen a lot of music that is rarely played. I've done a lot of research and unearthed some real gems, and also pieces of music that many pianists, not particularly difficult or not the most virtuoso pieces, many pianists or young students who might be looking for new repertoire for exams or for their own pieces might really want to play some of these pieces. So I hope to be able to share that with you next Saturday. Otherwise, thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you then. Look after yourself, stay well, keep safe, and let's keep the music playing. Don't stop the music.